If you can't give me a child, then perhaps we should consider ending this marriage, Jones declared firmly. I paused for a moment, collecting my thoughts before replying. All right, I understand. But just as he seemed ready to finalize his decision, I interrupted with unexpected news. Actually, I'm pregnant. Let me explain how we reached this point. I'm a homemaker in my 30s, married to Jones, who works in an office. Our journey began when I was employed at a food company. Through regular interactions over business matters, I found myself drawn to him. His rare but warm smiles left a lasting impression. Summoning my courage, I eventually confessed my feelings and proposed a relationship. However, Jones turned me down gently, saying, I'm flattered, but I already have a girlfriend. Fate had other plans, though. A month later, he approached me with surprising news. I ended things with my girlfriend because I realized I want to be with you. He confessed that my words had lingered in his mind, leading to the breakup. Although I felt guilty for inadvertently causing the end of his previous relationship, Jones reassured me with a soft smile, saying, Don't worry, it wouldn't have lasted anyway. His understanding solidified the start of our relationship. After 3 years of dating, we tied the knot. Jones expressed his wish to have children soon after marriage and asked if I'd consider being a homemaker. Since my job at the time was stressful and unrewarding, I agreed to his request and transitioned into managing our home full-time. Adjusting to life as a homemaker was more challenging than I'd imagined, but our marriage seemed happy and harmonious, making the effort worthwhile. Adding to this joy, Jones's family lived just a short walk from our home. Initially, I feared frequent visits and potential clashes with his parents, but they quickly proved me wrong. They welcomed me warmly, often saying, You're like the daughter we never had. I built a strong bond with his mother, Carol, and came to trust his father, Tom, who, despite being reserved, was dependable. However, this idyllic relationship didn't last. A few years into our marriage, their attitudes shifted dramatically. Tom became even more withdrawn, and Carol's demeanor transformed into something unrecognizable. Her once kind words were replaced with sharp criticism. Living so close, she began visiting often, especially when Jones wasn't home, persistently demanding, When will you give us a grandchild? It's your duty as a wife. This was a stark contrast to her earlier advice. Children are a blessing. They'll come when the time is right. The pressure mounted as Carol began comparing me to others. The neighbor just had a baby, she'd point out. Why haven't you? Despite her relentless comments, the real issue lay elsewhere. Jones had lost interest in having children. He avoided intimacy, citing exhaustion or his gaming sessions as reasons. Whenever I mentioned this to Carol, she dismissed it and continued blaming me, adding to my stress. Eventually, I confided in Jones about the pressure I was facing. He reluctantly agreed to make more effort, but our attempts to conceive remained unsuccessful. Carol's criticism grew harsher, further straining my nerves. To address the issue, we opted for fertility treatments. However, instead of bringing us closer, the process drove a wedge between us. Jones became distant, spending hours gaming and lashing out over trivial matters. He criticized me for spending money on hobbies and labeled me a burden, despite my sacrifices to support his wishes. One day, I discovered he had quit his job without telling me. When I confronted him, he coldly replied, It's none of your business. With Jones unemployed and uninterested in finding work, his days revolved around gaming. Our once rare arguments became frequent, and soon we stopped communicating altogether. I began questioning the point of staying in this marriage. Our bond had eroded, and the thought of leaving started to seem like the only option. One evening, unable to tolerate his behavior any longer, I confronted him. You need to grow up, stop playing games and find a job, I demanded. His response left me stunned. Oh, by the way, my mom thinks we should divorce if you can't give me a child. Unexpectedly, I felt a flicker of gratitude toward Carol. For once, her harsh words gave me clarity. Because, you see, I was pregnant. I'd recently found out but hadn't told Jones yet. And in that moment, I decided to withhold the news, realizing I needed to focus on my own future and newfound strength. I replied, Understood, then took the divorce papers I had already completed from a drawer and handed them to him. His reaction was one of surprise, clearly. He hadn't expected me to agree to the divorce, much less have the papers ready. He froze, stammering, and for the first time, his usual arrogant demeanor disappeared. He stood there, bewildered, though it seemed like he was about to speak. The pressure of his mother's words was weighing on him. Reluctantly, he signed the divorce papers, casting furtive glances at me. We then moved on to discuss the division of assets. Truth be told, there was little for us to split. While he had frequently complained about my spending, it turned out he had been the one indulging in reckless financial habits. He not only wasted money on video games, but also spent large sums at game centers, draining his savings. There were no savings or assets to divide, and Jones grew more dismayed as he realized this. Nevertheless, he pointed to a bank account with a sizable balance, suggesting it be included in the division. I calmly informed him that this account was not part of the settlement. This is money I saved before our marriage, so it's not up for division, I explained. His face drained of color. He then tried to lay claim to the condo we shared. Unfortunately for him, the condo was in my name, and I had already put it on the market. You can't stay here anymore. It would be a hassle. Please leave right away, I said, smiling. Besides, I was planning to move eventually, so I've been saving for a new home, I added, enjoying his shock as I confidently declared my independence. Saving money had always been a passion of mine. Even before marrying Jones, I had managed to save a significant amount from my job, which allowed me to purchase the condo when my career was advancing rapidly. This meant I owned considerable property, and with the proceeds from the condo sale, I could afford to build a new home downtown. Since these assets were acquired before our marriage, they weren't subject to division, something Jones didn't seem to understand. When he realized he wouldn't get a share of these assets, he was visibly stunned. We continued talking, but he couldn't recover from the shock. With little else to discuss, the meeting ended quickly. I submitted the divorce papers, and it was finalized without any complications. A few months later, I returned to my parents' house, where I received their full support during the birth of my son. I had a healthy baby boy, whom I named Ethan, inspired by a biblical figure. Now, I spend my days happily with my son and parents. I chose not to inform Jones about the baby, fearing Carol's interference if she learned of it. Meanwhile, Jones, evicted from the condo, moved back in with his parents, but he became reclusive after the divorce was finalized so easily. His appearance became so suspicious when he ventured out that the police often took notice, which made his situation rather pitiful. I later learned he had quit his job due to strained relationships with his colleagues. Apparently, he was disliked by many, particularly female employees, which led to his isolation. Eventually, he couldn't take it anymore and quit. Perhaps he had always been like that, hiding his true nature behind a facade of kindness when it suited him. 3 years later, I was working as the manager of a craft store, a place I had grown fond of. The owner, who was preparing for retirement, approached me with an unexpected offer. I'm getting older and thinking of retiring. Would you be interested in taking over the store? He asked. Given that my parents were helping with childcare, I had plenty of free time, and the idea of running the store seemed appealing. I didn't want to disappoint the regular customers, so I accepted without hesitation. While I was serving a regular customer one day, Carol and Jones appeared unexpectedly. Their insincere compliments about the store irritated me. Well, what brings you here? I asked. Carol mumbled something before abruptly demanding, "Give me my grandchild." Apparently, she had heard about my son's birth and was hoping to make him her heir. Why didn't you tell us? We were already in the middle of the divorce, Jones snapped, visibly upset. I didn't tell you because I wanted the divorce. I knew you would have done everything you could to stop it if you knew I was pregnant, I retorted, glaring at them. Carol persisted, demanding I return her grandchild, citing the 3 years we had been married. I was taken aback by her audacity. Just then, my parents entered. Sensing the tension, they asked, "What's going on? Is everything all right?" It seemed they had come after receiving a tip from a regular customer. Seeing Ethan with my parents, Carol rushed to him, cooing, "Oh, how adorable. He looks just like Jones when he was a child. I'm your grandma." I tried to intervene, but Ethan, with surprising firmness, declared, "I only have one grandma," and hugged my mother. My mother then politely asked Carol to leave, but Jones tried to forcibly take Ethan from my parents, shouting, "Just give him to my mom." I stepped in front of him to protect Ethan, but I was no match for his physical strength. I was shoved aside, and Jones nearly grabbed Ethan when, out of nowhere, my father executed a flawless shoulder throw, sending Jones sprawling. I looked up in shock to see my father, a former police officer with a reputation for competing in national championships, standing confidently. Jones, completely unaware of my father's skills, could only gape in pain and disbelief. "If you try to take my child or grandchild again, I'll take appropriate action," my father warned, showing his police badge. Carol turned pale, and they hurried off in a panic. I never learned what became of Carol and Jones after that, and truthfully, I didn't care to know. Several years later, Ethan expressed his desire to follow in my father's footsteps and become a police officer. "When I grow up, I'm going to be a police officer too, so I can protect Mom," he proudly declared. Under my father's guidance, Ethan excelled in his studies and martial arts, becoming a force to be reckoned with. I look forward to watching my son grow, grateful for the unwavering support and protection my father has given us. Thank you for watching until the end.